On the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Summer Mart, and I'm the public educator with Largo Fire Rescue. And we're so excited to have you here today for our virtual hurricane preparedness event. We have a great lineup of panelists here to help you better prepare for a potential storm. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is going to be recorded. It is live recording right now, and we will be able to have it posted on our website, largo.com/emergency, for later viewing. Questions are encouraged throughout the webinar today. If you are on Facebook, you can simply ask your questions in the comment box, or if you are on the GoToWebinar app, you can simply look for the question mark icon and ask your question right there in that chat box. If we run out of time at the end, so we're going to have our Q&A session at the end. If we run out of time and we don't get to all of your questions, we will have a frequently asked questions section posted also on largo.com/emergency. And then lastly, if you are using the GoToWebinar app on your cell phone, something that you might have to do is either swipe left or right in order to see all of the panelists speaking and be able to see the presentation slides. It just depends on the size of your phone. So if you can't see slides, but you can see someone speaking, just swipe to the left or right, and then you should be able to see the slides. All right, I want to thank all of our panelists for being here today. We really do have a great lineup of speakers. Today, we have Chief Cody Johnson, Division Chief of Emergency Management with Largo Fire Rescue. We have Chief Meteorologist from ABC Action News, Dennis Phillips. We have yours truly, Summer Mar, Public Educator with Largo Fire Rescue. We have Mecca Surfastini, the Emergency Management Coordinator with Pinellas County Emergency Management. Jessica McCracken, the whole community specialist with Pinellas County Emergency Management. Officer Vu Tran from Largo Police Department. Tony Salvareza, General Manager of Regional Services with Duke Energy, and Anna Marie Millett, the Investigator and Outreach Coordinator for Pinellas County Consumer Services. So a lot of great information we're going to be able to share with you today. I also want to give a very special thank you and shout out to our City of Largo staff from the Communications and Engagement and Community Outreach team. They have done so much to help us in the background of all of this, working behind the scenes, and they're going to be assisting us with question facilitation. So thank you, and Carrie, Katie Bishop, Brandon Graham, Preston Jarvis, and Julianne Perez. All right, and without further ado, I will now turn it over to our Division Chief of Emergency Management, Chief Cody Johnson.
Thank you, Summer. I appreciate it. My name is Cody Johnson. I'm the Emergency Management Coordinator for the City of Largo and the Division Chief of Emergency Management for Largo Fire Rescue. I would like to thank those logged on today and our panel of speakers. You know, as everybody knows, we're in uncharted territory right now. We're dealing with COVID-19, preparing for hurricane season simultaneously. This is something that no one else has ever dealt with. However, we as a city and you, our residents, must be prepared. We cannot let our guard down. Largo has taken a different approach to emergency management. You know, emergency management is no longer just a police and fire responding to a disaster. Largo utilizes an approach to what we have coined as a citywide approach. Our entire city is involved, from environmental services to our library staff, to accounting, to IT, and what an unbelievable job they do for us. And our employees have worked very hard to prepare our city and will continue to do so. You know, today we have some very intelligent speakers on our panel who will be providing you with a wealth of information. Everything from knowing your zone to generators to shelters and just to having an overall plan. You know, everything starts with a plan. Combine your plan with an accurate weather forecast from Dennis Phillips, and you'll be well on your way to being prepared. Largo is committed to you, our residents, and we will do our part. I can promise you that. And I leave you with this: the more prepared you are, the easier it will be to recover. And thank you, Summer. Summer's put in a lot of hard work to get this up and running. And thank you, Summer. I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Chief. And now we will have Dennis Phillips, Chief Meteorologist from ABC Action News.
Thanks, Summer. How you guys doing, everybody? Very interesting times. We're obviously in hurricane preparedness. In the past, we've gone through seminars, we've gone through expos, we've done it face to face, and now in what we're dealing with now, hopefully this information gets out to people who need it. If you don't know me, I haven't shaven for a couple of weeks. I've been on vacation preparing for expectations. I won't have many days off over the next couple of months. I go back today, and luckily the tropics remain quiet. And as we mentioned, I am Dennis Phillips, ABC Action News Chief Meteorologist. Been here since 1994. So I'm curious for the number of folks who have maybe been here a little bit longer, a little bit less, if you've actually been through a big storm here in the Bay Area. Charlie, back in 2004, that was really our storm. That was the storm that a lot of folks in the Bay Area actually evacuated to Orlando and ended up being right in the middle of it, because in our area, we luckily for our area, unfortunately for Punta Gorda, we had that turn that many of us remember so well if you lived here in that time, and turned down to our south, because at that point in time, 6 hours prior, the Hurricane Center pretty much had us right in the bullseye of a Category 4 hurricane. So that was really, at least in my time, the Bay Area's best exposure and highest probability of seeing a major hurricane. Now remember, and this is something if you're new to the area, maybe you don't realize this, it's been almost 100 years since the Bay Area has been hit by a major hurricane, 1921. So it isn't something that happens very often, as we knock on wood, hoping that continues for a while. But obviously the thing that I think folks in emergency management try to get across is you have to be prepared each and every day. And it's a little bit tricky this year because obviously a lot of folks are curious, well, what happens if I evacuate? Do I go to a place that may require social distancing? Will there be as many spots there as there have been in previous years? That's a really great question. And I'll be honest with you, many of those answers are still yet to come. There are plans. I've done a lot of these seminars with the city of Tampa, with Hillsborough County, with different areas, and there is a plan. But the biggest question is going to be, how effective is that plan going to be, depending on how many people decide to evacuate? So my lesson here, the one that we try to get across, is it is really important for you to know, and I'm sure the speakers here will let you know on this for the Largo area and all of Pinellas County, and for Matt and all the Bay Area, is at what point do I stay home and ride it out? And at what point do I evacuate? Now, there's an old adage in meteorology and in terms of hurricane preparedness: you hide from the wind, you run from the water. And that is really the key. Maybe this year more than ever before, if it's a situation where you're not required to evacuate because you're not in a flood zone, maybe that will be a situation where you have to consider, would I be better off staying home than going to a shelter? These are one of these important questions that you need to know in advance. You know, back in 2012, we had Hurricane Isaac coming. A lot of you folks may remember that. And the RNC, the Republican National Convention, was here in Tampa. Well, everybody was freaking out because we had a hurricane coming as the RNC was here. And I literally sat down in about 5 minutes and just jotted down some rules, things that I thought would be helpful for folks maybe to decide whether or not they evacuate, not to freak out with a storm that might be enough offshore that we're not going to have a problem with. And one of those came up literally, the seventh rule that I came up just happened to be rule number 7: don't freak out unless I'm freaking out. We're fine. And that is kind of taking off a life of its own in a lot of ways in terms of my viewers and my followers. But honestly, it's the message that I think all of us need to remember. And that is, how in the world are you going to make an educated decision to help your family, to keep your family safe, if you're freaking out? I mean, we all know as the storm gets closer, and boy, Irma was a perfect example of that 2 years ago, that as the storm gets closer, sometimes the track can shift east to west. And the thing about Florida, especially a storm that's coming in from the south, it doesn't take much if it's down around Cuba. Just a little bit of a shift down to our south is a much bigger shift, an East Coast storm. But if it goes a little bit, just we're talking 1 or 2 degrees in the other direction. It's a West Coast storm. And that's what made Irma so challenging, because it didn't come in from the east or the west. And here's a rule of thumb. If we get a hurricane coming in from the East Coast, you're rarely going to have to worry too much about water. I mean, you never say never. If it were go out in the Gulf and redevelop, maybe you might have some issues. But typically, the rule of thumb is if we get a storm coming in from the East Coast, we have more of a wind issue. And then if we have one coming in from the West Coast, that is our worst case scenario. That is our biggest concern. And with Irma, we couldn't figure out one way or the other if it was going to go east or west, because it was coming in from so far to the south. And that little bit of a change made a big difference in our forecast. But I know all of us remember. In fact, I'll tell you a quick story. We don't have a ton of time, but this was a Thursday night, Friday morning, as the track was still on the east coast of Florida. And we were all waiting for the computer updates. I'm sure pretty much every single person in this group was keeping an eye on what computer runs were changing. The European model, which is typically, you hear a lot of folks talk about the Euro. The Euro is traditionally the most accurate model out there, at least overall. Now, in a given time, it may not be. But usually, and especially with Irma, the Hurricane Center was going with that Euro pretty much model run to model run. Well, about 2 a.m. comes along, and I'm sitting at my computer like I am now, and I see the Euro go from the East Coast to the West Coast. Now, the new hurricane advisory doesn't come out until 5 a.m. And everybody who's going to bed, and not a lot of us were back then, we were kind of living from model run to model run. We're waiting to see what would happen. Well, when that went from East Coast to a West Coast storm, it got real, and for our area. And 20 seconds after I saw that run, I got a message, a Facebook message from a buddy of mine, Paul Delgado, over at Channel 13. And his response was just, oh my God, because we both saw what that model was going to do. But then there's the big question. The new Hurricane Center run did not come out or update didn't come for another 3 hours. So do you go on and tell on social media, and combined, him and I both have about 750,000 followers, do you go on and tell people that the Hurricane Center will very likely change the track to our area, or do you wait for them to make that update? And after a discussion, him and I both decided, you know what, we're going to go ahead and release this, because it might give people a little bit more of an opportunity to leave. And I will tell you, that's exactly what my family did. They were staying put, but when that model changed to West Coast, 2 a.m., everybody got up, and the closest they get was Atlanta. So obviously, I think we all remember that. But, if I could get any messages out here right now, and we can briefly talk about what the expectations are this season, but it is this year, you may have already had a plan. You may be well prepared. You may have thought, well, I've done this for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. I know what I'm doing. This year, with the limitations on evacuations, especially in terms of shelters, it could really change the way things go. So make sure this year of all years that you really know where and what you're going to do. I mean, I think everybody gets the idea of generators. It gets the idea of batteries and water and whatnot. If you lived in the Bay Area long enough, it's second nature to you. But this year, in terms of staying or leaving, it's a really, especially in terms of a shelter, it's a very different situation. Quickly, long-range hurricane predictions, we all have heard it, and I think there's a lot of validity to the fact that there's going to be a lot of storms out there this year. We've already had through the F storm. We've already had through Faye, right? But who cares if they're all in the middle of the ocean? I really think long-range hurricane predictions sometimes can be a disservice, because what happens over a period of time, if you have 3 or 4 or 5 years of above normal activity, and you hear the media and you hear everybody saying it's going to be an active season, but at your house, if you don't get anything, eventually you're going to think people are crying wolf. Oh, they're just trying to scare us. So my take, honestly, is it does not matter how many storms form. And the prediction is 14 to 18, maybe up to 20. And we'll probably have that many named storms. But does that mean they'll impact Florida? Of course not. There's no statistical number that says that in our Bay Area directly, the odds of us being hit are significantly higher because there happens to be 16 to 20 named storms out there. You could maybe argue the entire East Coast or the Gulf Coast combined might have a little bit higher risk, but in our area, we've not seen that. But it does tell us that with an active season, you would think there's going to be more storms out there, and typically those storms are August, September, and early October. The first couple of months of the season usually are not a big impact in terms of the Atlantic hurricane season. Sometimes the Gulf, but they're usually weaker. But usually From mid-August to early October is our prime time. And I'll leave you with this, is the last major hurricane to hit the Bay Area was in the middle of October back in 1921. So honestly, very often it's later in the season that we have to worry about it because it's more of a Caribbean or a Gulf situation. Remember, our worst case scenario is a storm that comes in from the Caribbean, splits Cuba and the Yucatan, goes north. They usually want to go to the Panhandle. Storms will go north. They naturally are drawn to the poles. So what happens to turn a storm to Florida? It would be something that would kick it east. What's that? A cold front. Well, how many cold fronts do we get in August or early September? Not too many. So they want to go north. But as you get later in the season, September or October, then you're more likely to have something maybe kick back toward the west side of Florida. It doesn't happen often. It's been 100 years. Let's hope it stays that way. But at this point in time, remember, this year of all years, know your zones, know your evacuation areas, know whether a shelter is good for you or your family, whether they allow pets. And throughout all of this, we will get there together. There's a ton of information out there. Stick to your expert, your trusted source, whoever that may be, and go with them. I think we've all seen on social media the misinformation that can be there sometimes. So if you keep it with us, we've got you covered. Thanks for stopping by, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dennis. That was very helpful information. We really appreciate you being here with us today. So thank you. All right, so I'm going to talk to you all now about some of those things that Dennis did just mention, but some of the really important first steps for you when it comes to hurricane preparedness, right? You want to know your evacuation zone. You want to know what your evacuation options are, and you want to make sure that you have those preparedness kits ready. So I do have a poll question here for those who are on GoToWebinar. You can answer the question via the poll. If you are viewing on Facebook, you are welcome to answer in the comments section. My question for you is, do you know your hurricane evacuation zone? How many of you actually know what zone you are in? The zones go from A, B, C, D, and E. And I'll share these results here in just a minute. Do you know your zone? All right, the answers are looking promising. I'll give it just another minute here. Everybody's answering. Okay. So this looks pretty promising. We have 85% said that yes, they do know their evacuation zone, and then 15% said no, they do not. But that's okay for those of you who don't know your zone yet. We will definitely get that taken care of for you, and we'll help you figure out how you can find out what your zone is. Let me just get back on here to share my screen. Okay, so you want to be able to know what your evacuation zone is, know what your evacuation options are, and being able to build your preparedness kit. Thank you. I wasn't able to change my slide here. There we go. Okay, now we're back in business. So your evacuation zone is based on that storm surge, which is high winds that's going to bring that water onto shore. Your evacuation zone depends on your proximity to water, and it depends on your elevation. So you can see here a map of Pinellas County, and it shows the colors of what our different zones are. The zones start with A, and that's going to be if our storm surge has a potential to reach up to 11 feet of water, then they would start to evacuate zone A and all manufactured home communities who are also considered in zone A. Then the higher those winds are determined to be, the more evacuation zones the county will determine to evacuate. So it doesn't mean with every storm that every evacuation zone is going to be evacuated. It all depends on the storm. Some things to keep in mind. Zone A is going to be the one that evacuates first in the event of an evacuation order. Residents that are in manufactured home communities are considered Zone A. And the reason why that is, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're close to water or that you're going to get affected by the storm surge, but it does mean that those winds are high enough that they could cause severe damage to the mobile home. So a very important message out to everyone living in manufactured home communities that if Zone A is asked to evacuate, we ask that you please evacuate as well, which means very important to know where you're going to go. Each storm is different, so it's important to stay informed and stay connected so you know where to evacuate and if your evacuation zone is asked to be evacuated. And lastly, your flood zone is different than your evacuation zone. So there's a website, and Jess will talk about it a little bit later, on where you can go to look up what your flood zone is, because that's more based on the rains, whereas the storm surge is based off of those high winds and those waters that come up on land. So your flood zone is different. So now let's talk briefly about what your evacuation options are. Let's say you're in Evacuation Zone A, or you're in a manufactured home community, and you know if we have a significant storm, you are going to have to evacuate. You do have some options. Option number one would be to stay with a friend or a family member in a non-evacuation zone. Another option that you have is to be able to stay in a hotel in a non-evacuation zone. And the reason why I emphasize non-evacuation zone is because whenever we had Hurricane Irma, we did have a few residents share their stories of how they went to evacuate to a hotel, but it was an evacuation zone B. And we actually ended up evacuating zone B. So they had to leave the hotel, and then they were scrambling to try to figure out what their other options were. So check to see if your hotel is in a non-evacuation zone. Your last resort option, option 3, it is there if you need it, is to stay in a public shelter. Now remember, a shelter is a life raft. It's not a cruise ship. It's not going to be comfortable. It's not the Ritz-Carlton. Okay, it's going to be tight spaces, and you really only want to pack just your essentials and really think about what other options you have before having to go to a public shelter. If you can stay home because your evacuation zone has not been ordered to leave, then you can stay home if that's your choice. You'll be more comfortable at home. If you have a friend or a family member that you're able to stay with instead of going to a public shelter, we really just want to stress we want to make sure you understand and have that expectation that these shelters are not the most comfortable place to be in. It is there for survival, and we will let you in with open arms, but if you have other options, please consider those. But shelters are an option if you need it. There are 3 types of shelters. I won't go too into them because Mecca's going to take care of that for us. But we have general shelters, pet-friendly shelters, and special needs shelters. So after talking about our evacuation options, I wanted to ask one more question to you all. If I have to evacuate, where do you plan to go? If you're in Zone A or you have to leave, where are you going to go evacuate? Are you going to stay with a friend or family member in a non-evacuation zone? Are you going to stay in a hotel in a non-evacuation zone? Do you plan to stay in a public shelter or go to a galaxy far, far away from here? Out of town, are you planning to travel? Out of state, out of town. You don't even want to be here during the storm. I'll give you all just a few minutes to answer those questions. And remember, if you're on Facebook, you are welcome to answer the questions in the comment section as well. We would love to hear what your plan is. And I'll share these results. Now remember, when you're thinking about evacuating, you want to think tens of miles, not necessarily hundreds of miles. So if you are thinking about traveling out of state and really getting far away from the storm in Florida, you want to make sure you evacuate way ahead of time. Even when you first start to see that storm out there in the cone, you want to travel right then and there because the roads will get very crowded because a lot of other people are going to want to travel as well. Okay, I'll go ahead and share these results here. So 45% said they'll stay with a friend or family member in a non-evacuation zone. That's great. And 29 said a hotel. Some will stay in a public shelter, and a good bit of you said you want to just get out of here, go to a galaxy far away. And in the time that we're in, just remember that we all want to maintain our social distancing as we get to these shelters or stay with a friend or a family member. Things look a little bit different right now, but we always want to keep those things in mind if we do have to evacuate, and keep that safety in mind as well. All right. Give me just one moment here and I will get back onto my presentation. Okay, so we talked about our options. We learned a little bit about what your options would be. I wanted to share with you a way that you can look up your evacuation zone if you don't know. There are a couple different options. You can look on your utility bill and it'll tell you what your evacuation zone is. You can call Pinellas County Emergency Management and they will let you know what your evacuation zone is. You can also go to www.pinellascounty.org/knowyourzone. And these are a few screenshots from the Know Your Zone program. Now, I will tell you, you want to look up your zone now while we don't have a storm. During Irma, everyone in Pinellas County decided that they needed to know what their evacuation zone was. And the website, it had so many people on there trying to find their zone that it was a lot slower than normal because it was being overloaded. So look at your zone now so you know. This picture here, it shows where I typed in the location. I just typed in Fairway Village. That's a local manufactured home community here. And once you type in your address or location, it'll tell you. The location is in Evacuation Zone Mobile Home, so they know that they will have to evacuate. If you look at the bottom here, it tells you several types of accommodations of hotels that you can go to evacuate. However, make sure that you click on the actual hotel so it will tell you what evacuation zone that hotel is in. See here it says Evacuation Zone X. That means that it is in a non-evacuation zone. So all of the hotels listed, they still might be in a zone. So you have to check and make sure. It also tells you the list of shelters, special needs shelters. Know Your Zone is a great resource. So a little homework for you. If you don't know your zone, go ahead and look that up on this website here, or give Pinellas County a call, or you can always call us here at our fire rescue. I'd be happy to help you find what your evacuation zone is. All right, building your evacuation kits or your stay kits. Whether you stay or you go, what is in your survival kit? It's going to look a little different depending on where you go. I have a list here. If you can go online and look at the Pinellas County Emergency Management Hurricane Guide, that's going to give you lists on whether you're going to a shelter or whether you're sheltering in place. A couple key points: medications and copies of your prescriptions, non-perishable foods, water. You want to think 1 gallon per person per day. Bedding for a small space. When you go to the shelter, you want to just have a twin-size air mattress. A lot of people sometimes just bring lawn chairs because it's a very tight space. Clothing, personal hygiene items. Right now, we want to make sure we bring our face coverings wherever we're evacuating to. Your important papers, a valid ID, a phone list, cash, a manual can opener. Items here I'll show you real quickly. If you're sheltering in place and you have nodules, don't forget your manual can opener. Your weather radio is very important if you want to get that up-to-date information regarding tornadoes or anything important that's going to be happening during that storm. Battery operated. Hand sanitizer, something important to bring with you. When the power goes out, it gets hot, so have a battery operated fan. You want to have your cash on hand and lighting. If the power goes out, you're going to need battery operated flashlights or lanterns. Don't use candles. On the fire safety side of things, don't use candles. It's just better, unless they're battery operated, it's just better to use battery operated flashlights or items like that, because the last thing that we want you to have is a structure fire in the middle of a hurricane. So let's stay fire safe as well, and always make sure you have working smoke alarms in your home. So again, I know this is a lot of information for what to bring and what to pack in your kits. If you go to pinellascounty.org/emergency, you can find a hurricane guide, and it has a long list. It's also on their website. Just make sure you pack now. Buy a few items each time you go to the grocery store. So if a storm is approaching, you're not trying to go to the store and get everything at the same time as everyone else is. So be prepared now with your items in your kit. And lastly, staying informed. There are lots of different ways that you can find out about emergency information. One is Alert Pinellas. If you go to largo.com/alertpinellas or the Pinellas County website, it's a notification system that will send you text messages, phone calls, and emails to let you know of any type of important information regarding a storm. It'll tell you which zones have to evacuate and much more. Stay close to your social media pages, your city and municipality social media pages, that is. We'll be pushing out all the important information that you need to know regarding the storm. Ready Pinellas is a great application that you can put on your phone. That is also a great way to download the hurricane guide, look at the shelter options, and it has great info for storm preparedness. The city and county websites, your municipality's websites, they'll be posting information on the storm as well. Your local news channels, and of course, especially during the storm, that weather radio. So lots of different ways that you can stay informed. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Mecca now, and she is going to go a little bit deeper into the shelter options that you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Summer. Hi, everybody. My name is Mecca Sorrestini. I am the Health and Human Services Program Lead for Pinellas County Emergency Management, which puts me in charge of the shelter plan. In Pinellas County, we have 3 different types of shelters. We have special needs shelters, general population shelters, and pet-friendly shelters. The special needs shelters are there to accommodate our residents that have functional and access needs. They have generators to support our electric dependent residents. So if you're electric dependent, we always encourage you to evacuate to a special needs shelter if you don't already have a generator at your home. And that way your medical machinery can still work if the power goes out. We do have limited supplies at these shelters. We provide cots and some equipment is available, but we do not have enough for everybody. So we ask that if you are going to come, you bring a blow up mattress or a cot to guarantee that you do have somewhere to rest. Now, these shelters, what makes them really different from the other 2 types is that they are actually staffed by the Department of Health, as opposed to being staffed by just the Pinellas County school staff, who staffs our general population and our pet friendly. Now, at the general population shelters, we don't have any of the backup generators. We do not have any cots or special accommodations. As Summer said, it is really a life raft, not a cruise ship. They are staffed by our school personnel. That's our teachers, our principals. They all pull together to staff those shelters for our residents. Now, 3 of our general population shelters are deemed pet-friendly shelters. You can find out which ones are going to be opened as pet-friendly from our website, pinellascounty.org/emergency management. But the difference is that they are staffed by Pinellas County Schools as well as Animal Services. Now, you do care for your pet in these shelters. What you do is the pets don't get to stay at your bed because there is the possibility that even though someone has a dog, they may be allergic to cats. So we have to consider all of that for all of our residents. So all of the pets are kept actually in the gym locker rooms, which is staffed 24 hours a day by Animal Services. You are in charge of cleaning up after your pet, feeding your pet, administering any medication. What Animal Services does is they clean all the common areas. So when you come to get your pet, walk them out, take them out to use the bathroom, they clean that walkway to make sure that it doesn't have 10 dogs walking across it before it's bleached. They also monitor who comes in and out with pets. So you sign your pet into them, and you have the same person has to sign that pet out. And that ensures that no one walks away with someone else's pet. We sheltered hundreds of pets during Irma, and it went very smooth, very well. Can you next slide for me, please? So the special needs shelters, we do ask that you register for these ahead of time. You do not have to register if you're only seeking shelter, but we do encourage you to, because that helps us plan for staffing levels and equipment needs. One way to register is online. You can go to pinellascounty.org/special needs and print the PDF fill it out or fill it out, then print it and mail it to our office. Our office address is at the bottom of the form. If you don't have a computer or you don't have access to a printer, you can call our office anytime at 727-464-3800 and leave your name, address, and phone number, and I will mail you a form and with instructions how to mail it back to me. Reasons you want to register for special needs or to go to a special needs shelter is if you're electric dependent on medical machinery. And I know there's electric dependent, a lot of people get confused on this. This doesn't mean your cell phone. It means, if you're on an oxygen concentrator, if you require a scooter in order to be mobile and that needs to be plugged in, that's an electric dependency. So basically any kind of electric dependency that has to do with medical or health care, we would consider a special need. If you require minimum medical or functional assistance, so if you need assistance, say that you have an aide coming into your home, but you generally live alone and can, you just get minimal help, then the DOH, Department of Health staff, is at the shelter to assist with that. Now, if you register and we determine that your needs are higher than our Department of Health staff would be capable of helping with, we will help you make arrangements at a local hospital to take shelter. So if you feel your needs exceed the program, we encourage you to go ahead and sign up anyway, and we will help you find those accommodations. Now in Pinellas County, we're a little different where we actually consider transportation a special need. Now, if you live, if you're a able-bodied young adult and you live 3 blocks from a PSTA bus stop, we expect that you'll be able to get yourself to a shelter. All PSTA becomes free during a ordered evacuation, and they do make stops at the special needs as well as the general population shelters. And they do allow you to transport your pet to a shelter at that time as well. But if you are, elderly and you don't necessarily have any functional or medical needs, but you do live pretty far from a bus stop and it would be tough for you to, we don't expect a 85-year-old to pull their suitcase a half mile to the bus stop. We would consider you a special need and we want you to sign up for the program to get that transportation assistance. Now, once you've registered, the forms come to the office here at Emergency Management, and we enter them into a database where every fire district in this county has access to that database where they can access the registrants in their cities, in their jurisdictions. They then determine what kind, if you're asking